from Washington, D.C.
President Trump live in the Oval Office doing the dance with reporters today in a conversation that has included a number of topics from Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide. Welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Kriti Gupta, I'm Joe Matthew. The President of the United States taking questions in the Oval Office following the signing, to be more specific, of an executive order. And the bulk of the questions there covering the President's conversation today with Chinese President Xi. The President celebrating progress on issues like TikTok and specifically, Kriti, saying that the deal has been approved. We're looking forward to getting the deal closed. He, referring to Xi, has approved the deal. That's a pretty big headline, and it's one that we need a lot more detail on.
A lot more detail. When asked if the United States was going to take a board seat as kind of a activist investor kind of role, he did not confirm that. He said the deal announcement is coming soon, though.
That's right. The man who's been deep in this story for some time is Bloomberg's Michael Shepard, who joins us live now here in our Washington bureau. Shep, what do you make of what we just heard? The president was asked if the U.S. will be taking a board seat. He simply said, we're going to announce it. It's a great deal for our country.
It's one of the many details we're still looking for clarity on, not only the board seat, but the overall price of the transaction. We've reported on the composition of this investor consortium of American buyers to include Oracle Corp, Andreessen Horowitz, and Silver Lake Capital Management, but there are still a lot of other questions about how this would work. Donald Trump has also talked about the U.S. taking some sort of fee for orchestrating the transaction the way an investment bank might, but we also haven't gotten any clarity on that, and that could be a pretty hefty payday for the U.S. And, of course, we've seen the president also try to get a cut of some other pending transactions as well, and that would include NVIDIA's sale of AI chips to China.
Well, as Donald Trump was speaking on the topic, the Wall Street Journal headline across that this might include some sort of fee that is paid to the U.S. government. Have we heard this before?
Well, we have. The president did mention something yesterday while he was in the U.K. talking about fee plus. But again, he has tried to push the characterization of where things stand on the deal beyond whatever details we have gotten in our reporting, Kriti. And it's interesting. He very much wants this to happen. And it's a reversal from his first term in office when he actually signed an order seeking to ban TikTok in the U.S. over national security concerns. And we just heard the president in the Oval Office talk about his own turnaround. He said that once he started using the app, he found that he liked it. And upon return to office, and he credits the app with helping him curry favor with younger voters, he decided he would do what he could to save it. And that's not only included orchestrating this deal, but it's also included extending the deadline for ByteDance to agree to divest the app a couple of times. The law specifies one extension is permissible. He's granted 4 so far, and we're now in the 4th, and that will carry us through December 16th. And that would buy, in theory, at least on paper, enough time for them to iron out whatever final details. And the president, while he said that Xi Jinping had granted approval, he did acknowledge that some other details and final arrangements still needed to be sorted.
All right. Bloomberg's Mike Shepard, we thank you so much. From there, we're going to go to Capitol Hill now. For the House of Representatives passed a short-term continuing resolution to keep the government open until November 20th. Now, House Republicans sending their bill to the Senate, putting the potential for a shutdown in the upper chamber, with Republicans unable to cobble enough votes together for passage.
On this vote, the yeas are 47 and the nays are 45. The 60-vote threshold having not been achieved, the bill is not passed.
Now we have just 11 days until what appears to be a likely shutdown. And by the way, only 2 legislative days once everyone comes back. The president commenting on the shutdown a short time ago. Early this afternoon, I spoke with Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia after both Senate Democrats and Republicans each blocked the other party's short-term funding plans. And started our conversation by asking the senator whether he thinks we'll have a shutdown and if Democrats will be blamed. Let's take a listen.
I believe it's the Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House. I think, frankly, Leader Schumer and President Trump ought to sit down, and Jeffries, whomever, but we said let's not put further health care cuts that everyone rates will go up, not just folks who buy through the Obamacare marketplace, but as I can tell you in my state, you had 700,000 more people going to the emergency room. Everybody's health care rates are going to go up. We said, let's not do further damage coming on top of the big, awful bill. So I think many of my Republican friends say quietly to me, hey, Mark, we get the fact that we are overextended ourselves. So I hope that we can still cut down and do a deal, although clearly the House has decided to punt on their responsibility. I don't think they're coming back until the beginning of October.
Well, you know, the argument that I've been hearing from Republican lawmakers is that we have a funding mechanism to deal with now, a funding deadline on the 1st of October, and Democrats want to deal with a policy debate that we should be having in November and December. Do you think that that debate will actually take place?
Why? The debate ought to be taking place now. Remember, this is the same Republicans who have, over the last 4 or 5 months, allowed the OMB director, frankly, I think illegally, to pick and choose which government programs to fund, regardless of what is already in the law in terms of the appropriations bill. So the idea of going ahead and saying, let's not do further damage to healthcare. I mean, one thing Donald Trump has done is definitely made Americans sicker in terms of taking away healthcare, cutting healthcare research. You know, I'm not sure why that debate is going to be riper in November than it is right now. And I think the American people understand that, want relief, and but you got to start where two sides sitting down at a table. I've been in business a long time and politics a long time. The only way to get DS is put the decision makers in the room and try to work it out. Donald Trump claims he's a great deal maker. Let's make a deal.
Well, you've been through this a few times, Senator. Do you think we're actually going to shut down?
I think we are. This is more than the normal, countdown. I think there are stark policy differences, and I really, again, think about many of my Republican colleagues who've been aghast that the OMB has arbitrarily been picking and choosing programs. It's got to come to a head, and I think the debate about restoring healthcare or not taking more healthcare away, it doesn't get better. And particularly, I think about in my state, everybody's going to get the notices starting October 1st of how much their rates are going to go up. And if you give you an example, if you're a $80,000 couple in Virginia Beach, in your 60s, and you're buying in the Obamacare marketplace, your rates are going to go up $800 a month, and you're going to get that reality in October. And why go through that kind of chaos when we can solve it right now?
I want to tap your experience as a former high-tech executive, Senator, because we have an important scoop today at Bloomberg reporting that President Trump is signing an H-1B visa overhaul executive order that would require a $100,000 fee for the visa authorization. Do you see companies paying this? Will this help the job market?
I guess there's nothing that President Trump's going to do that's going to surprise me. There have been certain like E4 and E5 programs, kind of a bit more obscure, where there's kind of a pay to come in. H-1Bs, I think many companies will pay, but how does that young entrepreneur, how does that person, particularly as we exclude some of our graduate students from other nations, I'm going to take a full look at what the president's proposing, but we still need to attract world-class talent in America. And unfortunately, because of the anti-immigrant flavor of a lot of the president's policies, we are not getting the same caliber of folks coming to our graduate programs, universities, and frankly, even in trying to come and work in America. And that's long-term going to hurt our economy.
Well, there's been a lot of news coming out of the White House today, and the Wall Street Journal is now reporting that the president was serious when he talked about moving back into Bagram Air Force Base, that Trump administration officials are, in fact, going to enter talks with the Taliban to this extent. Is this a wise move, Senator? Are you talking about it on the Intel Committee? And if we do this, do we have to shoot our way back in?
Well, Joe, I don't know. I mean, I saw those reports. We have obviously not been briefed, which if that is a serious policy proposal, we need to be. But remember, Donald Trump I thought he was going to end the wars around the world. We've not ended the war in Ukraine and Russia. If anything, now Russia's drones into Poland, into Romania. I think there was a violation of Estonian airspace just the other day. The conflict in Gaza, if anything, has gotten worse. Israel is now bombing our allies. The idea that Donald Trump would be part of an effort to put American forces back in Afghanistan, Tell me what's smart about that.
What's going to happen with, now you point out what happened in Estonia, a second Article 4 being triggered by a NATO ally, Senator. What's it going to lead to? It's Poland and now Estonia as Vladimir Putin keeps pushing the line.
Listen, Vladimir Putin, I think, has played President Trump, assuming that you could simply appeal to Trump's ego, and has deteriorated the Ukrainians' position, who are doing still an incredible job pushing back and, frankly, are rewriting the rules of engagement in warfare in terms of drone usage. But remember, Trump was going to solve this. If anything, now we've got Putin pushing against NATO nations, and the very question of whether America will honor our NATO commitment, I think is going to be soon tested. And as we saw, Bibi Netanyahu put a thumb in Trump's eye on bombing another American ally, Qatar, and now will Trump actually stand by NATO, which is, for all its flaws, helped keep the peace for 75 years post-World War II? The fact that that is even an open question ought to scare the hell out of all of us.
Well, you had a pretty scary floor speech, and I want to ask you this before you leave us yesterday about the intelligence community and the changes that this administration has made, namely Tulsi Gabbard accusing her of diminishing the American intelligence community. As ranking member of the Senate Intel Committee, you're looking at firings and a number of changes that have taken place. And I know you're questioning what this will lead to. What is Tulsi Gabbard trying to do with this purge?
She's not saying she committed to us when she was confirmed. I voted against her, but she said, don't worry, we're not going to politicize the intelligence community. It was policymakers selectively choosing intelligence that led to the war in Iraq. She even cited that. And yet we have exactly that behavior, where intelligence officials that won't bend their assessments, originally the National Intelligence Council members fired and removed, who wouldn't bend their assessment about Venezuela, folks at the National Security Agency run out, uniformed military officers, four-star General Tim Hawk being driven out by this extremist Laura Loomer, who Gabbard seems to respond to. Same thing happening at DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. Again, another general removed from his post because he wouldn't cook the books on the assessment around Iran. And it is time and again, our senior Russia covert official and analysts removed from their positions, and a number of a vendetta against people that, if they don't adhere to the president's ideology or idea of the day, are being forced out. The whole value of the intelligence community is to tell the truth and speak truth to power. And my speech yesterday was, if we undermine that, then America is going to be less safe. The intelligence community, when it doesn't tell the truth, gets us in trouble. And now I feel like intelligence professionals, we've lost literally decades of experience. And I'm not sure, what young person is going to want to go join the CIA if they feel like their assessments have to meet the political convenience of the day. That does not help America. And I just wish more of our, this should not be a partisan issue. These folks work for Democrats and Republicans alike, but it is unprecedented in my time in looking at the IC.
Well, I believe that Tulsi Gabbard, just quickly, promised you that this would not happen during confirmation. Will she come back to your committee to testify?
She absolutely made that promise. It was a very close, she got confirmed by only 1 or 2 votes. It was a partisan vote. I've been extraordinarily disappointed. And again, the thing that I've been begging my Republican friends, they all say, Mark, you're right. We can't believe this is happening. We can't believe this Laura Loomer lady, who is a 9/11 denier, has so much sway. But so far, they have been unwilling to speak out in any organized way. And every week that goes on, we lose intelligence professionals. And if we, again, I say this from a historical perspective as well, if we start forcing our intelligence analysts to bend to political realities, not tell the truth, that leads to very dangerous situations for our country. And every American should be concerned about that.
You've been listening to Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia joining the program earlier today. Now, of course, as more details emerge from President Trump's phone call with Chinese President Xi, the president offering details just moments ago on top of that from the Oval Office, telling reporters a TikTok deal is, quote, on its way. The question is what's next for the trade relationship between these two countries. We have a lot to discuss. We've got the perfect guest for you. Nazak Nikakhtar, National Security Practice Group Lead over at Wiley Ryan and former Undersecretary for the Commerce Department, joins the program. Thank you for coming on. Wonderful. Certainly appreciate it. Wonderful. We just got information overload in the last 10 minutes or so. Part of that, though, was Donald Trump saying that the TikTok deal has been approved. At the same time, some Wall Street Journal reporting suggesting that there may be a fee as a part of this deal. Does that assuage some of the security concerns around this deal?
Well, let's think about what the core national security concerns were when Congress legislated to ban TikTok. Former FBI Director Wray did a wonderful job going back over and over and over to Congress to hammer in. There's surveillance risks. There is algorithm risk. The algorithms prompting certain things that may be problematic for children to see, may incite discord, violence, issues like that in our civil society. And so that is what really led lawmakers to move to ban TikTok. So the core question to me is, what is happening with the algorithm? What's happening with the software? Is it going to remain intact? Are we going to be able to switch it, meddle with it? These are details that are yet to be seen. Certainly, there's lots of reportings that there's going to be some kind of consortium with American companies in ByteDance, and we're going to be running TikTok in the United States. Again, who sees the algorithm, who develops the algorithm, and does the United States have a right to tweak it? These are all questions that have not yet been answered, but goes to the core national security concerns.
And these are the questions that we've been asking as well. Now, I guess, for months, but most recently with the makeup of this deal, there's been reporting that the algorithm would be licensed, for instance, which could be a deal breaker for some. But look, you know what it's like to work with Beijing when it comes to our trade relationship. We're only going what the president just said. Should we assume that Beijing has signed off on this deal?
It's really hard to say. Look, I've been studying China. I've been dealing with China. China's growth prior to Xi Jinping, post Xi Jinping, for 25 years. China has gotten to a point that it does not, and I really want to underscore this, does not need to negotiate with the United States anymore. The Chinese Communist Party has consolidated power. They've indigenized high-tech capabilities. They have our supply chains where they need it. And so Xi Jinping is taking the position like, no, America, we control the algorithm. We are going to deal with what's in the algorithm, and we choose whether you get to see parts of the algorithm or not. So to the licensing question, are we getting does that mean that we can actually do anything with the algorithm? Right. Are we getting a license to all parts of the algorithm or to very specific parts? And again, are we going to be able to amend it or not? These are all outstanding questions that really go to the heart of the national security concerns.
When it comes to those national security concerns, though, there's also economic concerns that are a part of it, including we're talking about a licensing fee around TikTok. That's been floated when it comes to NVIDIA, other chip companies that have that supply chains across Asia as well. Are there concerns for broader corporate America, or is that part of the Trump administration rhetoric around trade?
The administration is trying to do a couple of things, right? It's very troubled by the deficit. It's very troubled by the fact that, it's just so difficult for federal agencies to get appropriated dollars to get to do what they want. And there's always a political dispute into how much you're going to give each agency. So I understand where their concerns are. I understand that they're trying to figure out, like Wall Street does, every place they can to make a nickel and a dime. But then the national security community is saying, whoa, wait, instead of controlling critical technology, we're now selling it, and we're incentivized to sell it by allowing the U.S. government to make money of it. Two parts of a very important debate. Congress needs to speak. Congress has been silent. Congress has the ultimate authority. Right now, there's sort of murmurings, discord in Congress, but they're going to have to legislate. These are open-ended questions that really impact, one, a shortcoming of Congress, not appropriating money adequately for the federal agencies to do what they're going to do. So are they going to say no back to the old ways we can't appropriate, or are they going to allow this kind of mechanism or something else?
Yeah. Well, they talked about more than TikTok. This is what we're seizing on because it's a breaking headline right now. But this is a long conversation, and the president says they did agree to meet at the APEC summit next month in South Korea. As we've heard from the White House, and we heard from Mark Warner just now, you need to get the principals in the room to make a deal. What's going to come from this summit?
You do need it. I mean, we have really important, we talked about this before, geopolitical issues that have to be hammered out. However, the business community, the politicians, policymakers are all, Wall Street, they're all at the edge of their chairs.
Can they get a trade deal?
Summit, I think it's very doubtful for the following reasons. I think Beijing has the U.S. exactly where it needs it. We need things from them. We need our magnets, right? We're trying to give critical technologies to them in order to get some magnets out of them, in order to have China not interfere geopolitically in the way that it has. China doesn't care. In China's interest, it's in their best interest to maintain the status quo. So I think Xi Jinping's angle is going to be to go to all these meetings, buy himself more time. Buy himself more time. Keep the status quo, because the status quo is working in Beijing's favor.
Yeah, they spent quite, I would argue, years, if not decades, preparing for this potential scenario. Which brings us to a threat that the president has made previously in terms of secondary sanctions. You mentioned the geopolitical conflict. He's talked about 100% in terms of levying any economy, including China, that buys Russian oil. Can the Chinese economy withstand a world where the U.S. puts on 100% of secondary sanctions on them?
Absolutely. I think most people are going to say no, but I'll tell you why yes. We constantly make the mistake of imputing the Western economic system, the market-based system, onto China. It's not the same way in China. The Chinese government controls the economy. It moves every lever in the economy in a way that the U.S. would never do it. So if there's economic turmoil, they will pump more capital into the economy. They can withstand more economic distress. We saw what happened with the Chinese real estate market. They bounced back. Economic speculators were saying this is going to be the end of the Chinese economy. And the Chinese government, look at the Iranian government. The people are poor. The government likes to keep people poor. It keeps them quiet. The people don't have the means to fight back, other than just little protests, right? It's the same with the Chinese people. The government has every incentive to keep them busy trying to make ends meet day to day. And so they're not really concerned about the economic conditions in the country. They will manage.
It's great to have you back, Nazak. Thank you, as always. Nazak Nikakhtar, National Security Practice Group Lead at Wiley Ryan. It's great to have you with us. A few moments ago, the president also said that President Xi would welcome an end to the war in Ukraine and called again for the release of Israeli hostages. Now, both of these issues we expect to be in focus when the UN General Assembly convenes next week in New York. And joining us now to preview the event here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio is Hagar, founder of Greenwich Media Strategies, former director for Syria and Lebanon on the National Security Council in the Obama administration. Hagar, it's great to see you, as always, on Bloomberg. Your thoughts about next week, as dozens of nations are set to recognize a Palestinian state. The United States will not be one of them. Does that advance any cause in this war?
No, on the contrary, if anything, I'm very concerned about what's coming next week. And it's hard to predict exactly how things will go down. But basically, as you noted just now, you've got at the UN General Assembly, we have the UK and the French who have promised to recognize a Palestinian state at this event. And if they go through with that promise, the French in particular, you're talking about the first G7 states to ever do so. It's a very significant move. But it's a move that, as I've said before on this show, comes with zero strategy. It came with zero conditions on the Palestinian leadership. And for example, it didn't say something along the lines of, hey, if you get rid of pay to slay, we'll recognize you in a state. Hey, Mahmoud Abbas, you're feckless and corrupt and you don't control your people. But if you can find a way, or you have a plan to do that, and a succession plan and fair elections, maybe we could recognize a state. It's a move that has no strategy to it and doesn't tie to what's happening on the ground in Gaza whatsoever. On the contrary, because they've now promised to do this, the Israelis have hit back the Netanyahu government and said, you know what, if you go through with this, we're going to annex the West Bank, which, by the way, is not a move I would recommend the Israeli government do. If they go ahead and do that move out of spite, each side really, by the way, are cutting off their nose to spite their faces. If the Israelis do that, the Emiratis have said that it could undermine the Abraham Accords, which would be devastating. So all of us working on the Middle East are watching next week very closely, with bated breath, hoping that things don't unfold the way I just mentioned.
Well, Hagar, let me take that one step forward. If in a potential unraveling of the Abraham Accords, which, as you point out, the UAE has been very clear about a couple of weeks ago as kind of a red line, How much does that affect perhaps the kind of regional conflict? Does that get on board the Saudis? Does that get on board some of the other allies for not only the Emiratis, but ultimately the Palestinians?
Well, where you see things where this could really play out is ultimately a halt in a lot of efforts. And you have a lot of good work, a lot of progress happening elsewhere around the region when it comes to things unfolding in Lebanon, talks between Syria and Israel that we know are happening toward hopefully a security agreement, the role that the Saudis are playing. By the way, the Emiratis and the Israelis are very close. And when you talk about regional integration and the increase in trade that we've already seen between Israel, the UAE, Israel and Bahrain, and Israel and Morocco as Abraham Accord countries, it's phenomenal. You're talking about billions and a huge jump in trade that took place in just such a short period of time. And I'm not even talking about the cooperation they have on intelligence and security arrangements. These are relationships we don't want to see go backwards. What I would expect is more that it would freeze everything, if you will. And freezing isn't the worst thing. That doesn't mean it can't go back up again. Things can't pick up again. But it doesn't mean you're moving forward. And in this corner of the world, you really want things to move forward. But my problem, my concern is, given how much is being worked on around the region with the air of regional integration with Israel, prosperity through peace and all that, how do you do that if you've got this elephant in the room? If Israel annexes the West Bank, this is a maneuver that will definitely get in the way of peace efforts, and it doesn't serve anybody. By the way, it's not just Israel that will lose, the whole region loses. The Europeans are also losing with their strategy. It makes no sense for anybody who's ever worked on Middle East foreign policy. I just don't understand the foreign policy maneuvers that were started by the Europeans this way, and the Israeli government response. But it will definitely undermine a lot of these efforts.
Hagar, help us understand what the president is up to when it comes to Bagram Air Base. Listen to what he said a little bit earlier. This seemed to come out of nowhere in a remark the other day. He said more about it today as the Wall Street Journal reports that the U.S. is set to enter talks with the Taliban to somehow reclaim the base. Here's the president from earlier.
We'll see what happens with Bagram. We're talking to Afghanistan. It should have never been given up. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. There was no reason to give it up. I was leaving Afghanistan. I was leaving. I was the one that got it down to 5,000 soldiers, but we were going to keep Bagram.
You wonder, Hagar, what kind of force protection alone would be required to pull off a move like that without losing any lives. But let's say we do set up camp again at Bagram. Would that become the target for retaliation anytime Israel offends its neighbors?
Well, American presence across the region always is at risk for a number of reasons. Whether it's policies and moves that other militants and militias and terrorist groups don't like, or whether or not it has to do with Israel. And I wouldn't pin Israel on for all of it at all. But when it comes to air bases, and it's our air base, and we built it, and we like to have the U.S. military, the U.S. government likes to have presence all over the world. There are many reasons for that. It's not just because in case something happens, when you're confronting, for example, a country like China that is expanding its global influence, including in that corner of the world, then you want a counterbalance there. You want something to push back against that. Now, the Trump administration believes in negotiating and making deals with all sorts of characters, including very unsavory characters. When it comes to the Taliban, I personally am not a believer that it will work. If, for example, you pursue talks and you're able to get out of it, for example, better women's rights, women who can go back to educate to school, the women who can see doctors again. I mean, obviously, as we know, there are no women's rights in Afghanistan. It's absolutely horrific. So if there are positive pieces that come out of it, for example, if they're pursuing talks, they're not going to go to Bagram if they don't have the permission of the Taliban. And so they're pursuing these talks. I just don't have a lot of hope for these talks is what I'm trying to say. The Taliban have a very specific goal, and their goal is not to be recognized by countries like the United States whatsoever. Their goal is to impose an extreme and horrific form of Sharia Islam and repress its own people, and to try and have some international relations so that they can still maintain some form of wealth. But that said, this administration, they want this airbase. Could they, in a deal, get it and maintain some level of security? Yes, of course, but it will always be at risk to different terrorist elements. Even if the Taliban say, okay, you're allowed to come, you have numerous terrorist groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan that will cross over into Afghanistan and threaten that base for sure.
Hagar, Chemali, founder of Greenwich Media Strategies, we thank you so much walking us through some of the conflicts in the Middle East. Certainly appreciate your time this evening. We'll turn back to the president's Oval Office comments and the looming government shutdown deadline with our political panel in a moment. But first, let's walk through some of the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. SEC Chair Paul Atkins announcing earlier today that they will move forward with plans to overhaul investor disclosure rules for publicly traded companies. This comes the same week President Trump suggested via Truth Social that the SEC should move to semi-annual rather than quarterly reporting. In his announcement, Atkins echoed Trump's criticism that quarterly reports have driven corporate leaders to focus too much on short-term returns and noted that many investors get more of their information from earnings calls.
A panel of vaccine advisors hand-selected by Health Secretary RFK Jr. voting today to end the CDC's universal recommendation that people of all ages get COVID vaccinations instead of leaving the decision up to individuals and their medical providers. A spokesperson for the panel said the group believes the effectiveness of the COVID booster is based on low-quality data and analysis, that there are still safety concerns with the shot that have yet to be addressed.
A federal judge in Florida has tossed out President Trump's $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times for being too long, at 89 pages in length. U.S. District Judge Stephen Merriday found that the lawsuit unmistakably and inexcusably violated the court's rules requiring clear and direct claims by featuring, quote, repetitive, superfluous, and florid allegations and details. He's also said that Trump's lawyers may refile an edited version within the next month.
Senator Ted Cruz is making some waves today after speaking out on the Jimmy Kimmel news. Not in the way some would suspect. Cruz, of course, the chairman of the Commerce Committee that has jurisdiction over the FCC, speaking on his own podcast, likening FCC Chair Brendan Carr to a mob boss, and then saying this.
Jimmy Kimmel has mocked me so many times I cannot count. The corporate media, they are dishonest. They are liars. I hate what Jimmy Kimmel said. I am thrilled that he was fired. But let me tell you, if the government gets in the business of saying, we don't like what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like, that will end up bad for conservatives.
The president was asked about Cruz's comments earlier this hour, saying that he disagreed with Ted Cruz. And we should note that Jimmy Kimmel is actually not fired, at least not at this time. Joining us now with their reaction to these stories and more, this evening's political panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, alongside our Democratic analyst Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, political science professor at Iona University. It's great to have both of you with us here to get into this. Rick, Ted Cruz not going to be on the Christmas card list at the White House this year?
Oh, you never know. I mean,
how many conservatives is he speaking for?
He's a conservative, right? I mean, like, whether you like it or not, Ted Cruz is actually a conservative. He's not a MAGA guy. He believes Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. He believes in fiscal conservatism. He's a deficit hawk. I mean, he echoes the voice of conservatives all around the country today when he says we are marching towards censorship. And conservatives have always been on the wrong side of censorship in the sense that, you know, they feel like they're the ones who've been censored so much. So all of a sudden, shoes on the other foot, we have government agency heads saying, I'm going to decide what you can say and what you can't say on television. He knows that Donald Trump will not be president forever. Brendan Carr will not be headed up in the FCC forever. And he doesn't want a retribution against conservative voices that would have been started by conservative voices.
Jeannie, weigh in here. What did you make of Ted Cruz's comments?
Well, Crudy, I seldom agree with Ted Cruz, but I agree with him on this. ABC is not constrained by the First Amendment. They can fire Jimmy Kimmel, or as Joe said, suspend him for a period of time. But the reality is the Supreme Court has spoken about coercion from the federal government. In 1963, they said while government could try to persuade private entities about content, they cannot coerce them. And so the question here is going to become, since Nexstar wants to get that acquisition done, and to get the acquisition done, they need the supportive card, and then they also need him to bend some of these FCC rules. Was his going on to that right-wing podcast and saying what he said a form of coercion? And I think there's a case to be made it was. That said, again, ABC, Disney, they can suspend. It's nothing to do with that. But the issue is the regulators going in and coercing. That is going to be a step too far if the Supreme Court holds the line to the Bantam Books case.
Really interesting. We've got apparently a government shutdown in the offing. Maybe you can both tell me that I'm wrong here, but everyone we've spoken with all day seems to think that the odds increased greatly today as a continuing resolution authored by Republicans passed the House, but that and a Democratic version both failed in the Senate. We talked earlier today with Tom Emmer, the Republican whip, the majority whip in the House of Representatives, about what's going on here. Here's what he said.
If you want to jam the Senate, then we would have put a bunch of our priorities in it, and we would have sent those over and gone home. We didn't do that. We effectively are leaving things the way they are. It is a nonpartisan continuing resolution. In fact, the only thing that was added to it is something that I think everyone here agrees on, Republican and Democrat, and everyone across the country should agree on. That is plussing up dollars for the executive branch security, for the Supreme Court justices' security, and for members of Congress.
So not jamming the Senate here, Rick, but Tom Emmer did talk about the blame game here, and he said the person that's going to get blamed primarily will be Chuck Schumer. Is he right?
Well, certainly Republicans will blame him. He did miss the fact that there were actually two things that were added to the House bill, and one of them was $1 billion that had originally been appropriated for the District of Columbia is now back in there. So you would think Democrats would actually like the idea that they were going to get their tax money back. So, look, it's all about Schumer right now. I mean, and this is probably a Schumer miscalculation, not the first one we've ever seen him make. He was so sore that he missed the opportunity to raise heck last March when there was another continuing resolution fight, and Democrats beat him up so bad that he's paying penance now. But the problem is the strategy is the wrong strategy. You know, the best thing he could do right now is let this moment pass, fund the government, and fight it out on appropriations. That's where he can actually make a difference without actually looking like his party's part and parcel of an effort to shut down the government. Yeah.
Jeannie, you got to weigh in here. Is this a Schumer miscalculation?
You know, I think Schumer's under a lot of pressure. And your conversation with Senator Warner, I think he referenced some of those. You have Democrats who are just fuming over these rescissions, the activities of the OMB director. They are fuming over the big, beautiful bill, the fact that Republican leadership won't sit down with Democratic leadership. And Senator Schumer is in a difficult place because let's not forget, he has not even endorsed Mamdani in his own home state for the New York City mayoral race. And I say that because there's a huge divide between Chuck Schumer and this very active progressive wing of the party. And one thing they hit him on bad was what Rick just mentioned, what he did in March, where he allowed the continuing resolution to go forward. So I think that's what's motivating this. But I have to agree with Rick. I think this is a bad strategy. The Democrats are going to do Donald Trump's bidding and Russ Vote's bidding if they proceed in this manner, because I think Donald Trump wants a shutdown. So if things get worse in this economy, they can blame the Democrats.
All right. Rick Davis, Jeannie Sheehan Zaino joining our political panel tonight. We thank you so much. You can learn more about these stories you heard here tonight. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
And a programming note, make sure to tune into a new Wall Street Week with Bloomberg's David Weston next on Bloomberg.